Fanciful promises and self-salesmanship made Vivek Ramaswamy a billionaire by age 38. That same playbook has fueled his early rise in presidential politics. Win or lose in 2024, he'll emerge richer and more powerful than ever, just how he planned it. Hi everybody, I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is senior wealth reporter John Hyatt. John, thanks so much for joining me.
Always good to see you, Brittany.
GOP presidential contender Vivek Ramaswamy went from a relatively unknown candidate to part of the national conversation really overnight, starting in that August debate. So to kick things off, can you tell us who is Vivek Ramaswamy?
Vivek Ramaswamy is a businessman. He made his fortune first in hedge fund investing and then by starting a biotech company called Roivant Sciences. That's ROI Vant Sciences. And, Vivek is somebody who is always thinking about ROI, whether it's in business, whether it's in politics, whether it's in the friendships he pursues. And his obsession with getting his own personal return on investment and maximizing that has driven him to the billionaire ranks. He became a billionaire a few months ago when Roivant's stock was at its peak. It's since dipped a little bit, but he still boasts a very impressive $930 million net worth as of yesterday's market close. And, he also owns a Strive Asset Management. They're an investment firm that he founded just before entering the presidential race. So, he's somebody with his hands in multiple hats, so to say. He's got his biotech empire. He's got his Strive Asset Management firm, which sells ETFs to retail investors and boasts an anti-woke ideology. And now he's entered politics, and he's done a very interesting job of sort of marrying those interests.
Before we kick things off and discuss his obsession with the return on investment, he has some Midwestern roots. Can you explain where he's from and the importance of that?
Vivek grew up outside of Cincinnati. He's a first-generation son of two parents who left India to pursue a better life in the United States. He went to an elite Catholic boys' school where he graduated as valedictorian, and from there he got accepted into Harvard, and he's been on the rise ever since.
You mentioned that he has this sort of anti-woke ideology. What was the catalyst to really propel Vivek Ramaswamy to run for president? And what are some of those main issues that he's really championing?
It's a good question. Why is he running for president? This is a millennial finance guy who has no political experience. He didn't vote in numerous presidential elections during his 20s. So, I think we can trace Vivek's sort of political awakening back to 2020. He's always been, conservative, and, at Harvard, he, was affiliated with the Republican Club there. When he was at Yale Law School, he made friends with people like future U.S. Senator J.D. Vance, who was a classmate of his. He met Peter Thiel at Yale. So he's always been somebody who's, been conservative and right-leaning. But in 2020, there was, of course, we all know 2020. It was, early COVID. There were protests after the murder of George Floyd. Black Lives Matter was front and center. And Vivek was faced by employees at Roivant who wanted him to speak out on behalf of the Black Lives Matter protests. And Vivek didn't want to do that. And that was sort of his first tussling with political issues, was in the business context. So, flash forward a year or so, he's been writing op-eds for the Wall Street Journal. He's appearing in Fox News. He steps down from Roivant as CEO to focus on this stuff full time. And he writes his first book, Woke Inc., becomes a New York Times bestseller. All of a sudden, he's kind of, as the New Yorker christened him, the godfather of anti-wokeism. And so, from there, he founded Strive Asset Management. He found a way to monetize the anti-woke gospel that he's preaching. And by running for president, he's essentially found a new platform or a new way for him to get his message out there and to build his own profile and to build the profile of Strive as well.
In your reporting, you discussed his obsession with return on investment. You were actually with him on the campaign trail, both in New Hampshire and then Iowa. So how did you see that playing out as you reported on him?
You know, it's interesting because his focus on ROI, we can trace that back to his hedge fund days and his, days as a biotech entrepreneur founding ROI Vant Sciences. So it's sort of a long-held worldview that Ramaswamy operates under. But it's completely different in retail politicking, in Iowa diners and New Hampshire restaurants, right? This is a whole different environment that he's operating in. Yet he remains the hyper-analytical, always listening, always calculating guy that he was in business. And we see this through just the way he responds to people's questions. He's very good at reading a room. He knows how to whip a crowd up, as you've seen yourself in Iowa. And, sometimes, we see it by him sort of mucking about in some of the more conspiratorial QAnon-themed ideas that some of these GOP primary voters are asking about. For example, in New Hampshire, one woman asked about the epidemic of child sex trafficking in the United States, and he immediately referenced Sound of Freedom. That's a movie that's been embraced by QAnon adherents, and you see the results when he sort of name drops these ideas or these concepts. People clap, people like it, they see that he understands the issues that they care about and that they are thinking about. But his ROI also extends to powerful folks in society who can help his campaign. When I was trailing him in Iowa, he, casually name-dropped Elon Musk as an advisor that he would want if he were to be elected president. Sure enough, that generated news stories, people saying, Ramaswamy says he'll appoint Elon Musk an advisor. Sort of overlooked in that, though, too, was that Ramaswamy has praised Elon Musk for gutting Twitter's workforce by 75%, saying that he wants to model his own dismantling of the federal bureaucracy on Elon Musk. And sure enough, 2 days later after those comments, Elon Musk on his platform X endorsed Ramaswamy for the vice presidential slot. So, Vivek is always eyeing opportunities, whether it's to win over the retail voter or to win over another backer like Musk. He's always calculating.
Something that you said that I can second is that he can really work a crowd. And something I noticed in Iowa, I was able to see most of the candidates, and he was able to get his points across very succinctly. He has those 10 truths that are succinct. They hit on a host of different issues, a lot of red meat issues. And I want to talk about his retail politicking a little bit. You wrote this in your story. Donald Trump campaigns like Donald Trump operates business, but you wrote Vivek Ramaswamy campaigns like Vivek Ramaswamy. First, can you explain that a little bit? And second, how is he doing on the campaign trail?
Yeah, so, who is Vivek Ramaswamy, right? That's kind of a fundamental question of understanding how he operates. And, folks I spoke with who worked with him in business say that he is nonstop. Few people have as much energy as he has. The guy eats 3 or 4 meals at a single meal, is what his longtime friend and Strive co-founder Anson Frericks told me. And so on the campaign trail, you see a guy who is essentially just nonstop. He's event after event. He answers questions. He smiles with people. He's always alert. He's not somebody who sort of, slips into, automaton mode and, just reads off a teleprompter. He doesn't use a teleprompter. He basically extemporizes all of his speeches. And, he's always seeing ahead of what his audience is thinking in a way. He knows sort of how they think. He knows the issues that they care about. And he's always playing on them.
One of the defining moments in August's debate was him and Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador, clashing over foreign policy. That led to people saying he might not be experienced to be the president, but we haven't seen him really embroiled in any major controversies on the trail so far. But in his private life, what are the controversies he's faced there?
Vivek Ramaswamy hasn't... he's not like a Trump type who has faced all these accusations of fraud and, wrongdoing. Like, I think The biggest controversy he's faced is, one of his companies, Axovant. This was the company he created and took public in a massive $3 billion IPO. And its only asset was an Alzheimer's drug that had already failed 4 clinical trials, but he purchased it for $5 million. And, his claim and those that he was working with was that this drug was overlooked, that it actually was going to be this big cure for Alzheimer's. And so, this was right when he founded Roivant. This was sort of the first big test case for Roivant, which was rescuing drugs shelved by Big Pharma. And, they took it public in this big IPO. He built out Roivant. And, 2 years later, the drug flopped its 5th trial. Today, that company, Axovant, is in the process of being liquidated. And so it was a massive failure. And, Vivek has recognized that it was a massive failure. But, ultimately, he didn't lose from it. He did fine. Roivant continued to grow before Axovant flopped. And, Roivant is an interesting company because it's a biotech company, but essentially it's a venture capital portfolio company. It buys up all these different drugs. Some of them don't work, and some of them do. And the company has never turned a profit. So it's kind of ironic that the big return on investment, themed company has never made a profit. So I think there's some controversy there. But I think more recently on the campaign trail, he's been stirring up controversy with a lot of his provocative, pledges, whether it's dismantling the federal bureaucracy by laying off 75% of the workforce, whether it's cutting off aid to Ukraine. These are not statements he makes offhanded. These are intentional. He knows that they're going to drive press, and earned media is a big part of his campaign strategy. So, he's finding ways to drive ROI in politics through stoking controversy.
You were able to join him on the campaign trail a few times, once in New Hampshire and then in Iowa directly after that first debate in August. So can you give us a feeling of what your personal impression of Vivek Ramaswamy was?
Hyper analytical, very numbers focused, very intense, always alert, always somebody who's thinking ahead, very online savvy. He's constantly on X or on Instagram, posting videos of himself talking or, coming out with snarky tweets. He's nonstop. He's somebody who is in campaign mode 100% of the time. And he tells me that, the only time he's not in campaign mode is when he's, at home with his, wife and 2 children in Columbus, Ohio. But, the guy is campaigning nonstop, so it's not like that's a ton of his time.
So those tweets are Vivek, not a social media team?
I didn't see any social media team drafting tweets on his behalf. I'm sure he has people who will do that, but a lot of his tweets are him tweeting on the fly. He even interrupted one of our interviews to send out a tweet.
Do you know what the tweet was?
Yeah, it was so we were driving across New Hampshire, and I was in the car with him, and there were 2 other journalists there, and in the course of the interview, he kind of stopped because one of his advisors had texted him something that Al Sharpton had said. And he said, I know what I'm going to say here. And so he drafted a tweet basically mocking Al Sharpton. And I think it got like over 1 million impressions or something. So, and it was quick. He didn't give it much thought. It was, boom, there's a tweet. Okay, back to the interview. Like, here we go. He's nonstop.
You were with him, and now he is part of the major dialogue when it comes to this 2024 election. Do you think there's anything missing when it comes to Vivek Ramaswamy in the national conversation?
I think that there is a general lack of understanding of his business interests and how his ongoing business interests continue to inform the way he politics and the way he sees the world. He told me, look, I've stepped down from my boards, I'm not involved in my businesses, but he remains the controlling shareholder of Strive Asset Management. So he's ultimately the ones who makes any sort of big decision that, Strive has to do. Even his own campaign disclosures still list him as the executive chairman of Strive. That's a position that he said he stepped down from, and we never got a good explanation for why his own campaign disclosures still say he's executive chairman. So I think in general, there's sort of a lack of understanding of how Roivant works. but also that, this is a guy who is still operating his businesses, who's still, has a lot financially to gain from running for president. And that's what I hope our piece in Forbes explores.
Don, we're a couple months from the first primary election. What do you see next for Vivek Ramaswamy?
I think he's going to lose to Trump. I think they're all going to lose to Trump. And I think Vivek is smart enough to understand this. There have been rumors that he would be a good vice president for Trump. He's mostly swatted those rumors aside. He told me, I don't do well as a number two. He doesn't want to be vice president. But look, who knows? Maybe he'll change his tune. We've seen him change his tune on various issues in politics, so who's to say he won't again? But the way he's engineered his political profile is that he can't lose. He's only getting more attention for himself. He's become part of the MAGA pantheon, and he has a business that directly aligns with his political persona. So that company, Strive, stands to do well too. So wherever Ramaswamy goes next, he's probably going to emerge a winner.
In August, you reported he is a self-made billionaire. So financially speaking, is this run for president good for Vivek?
Yes, it certainly seems to be. I mean, he has put his own money into his campaign, to be fair. As of June 30th, he'd sunk about $16 million into his campaign, $15 million of which was booked as a loan. But, as we write in our piece, you could also view that as a marketing expense for Strive. He's gained access to millions of viewers through his, endless hits on Fox News, through the debates. This is somebody who is now a national figure. 6 months ago, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, and we're talking about him now on Forbes Talks.
Indeed, and don't forget, he's only 38 years old, so he's going to be with us for decades to come.
John Hyatt, thanks for your reporting.
Thanks, Brittany.